Also, VRA is reeling under the cash waterfall mechanism, among other issues. We've been joined on the telephone line by former Power Minister Dr. Kwabena Donkor. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us here on the Morning Star. Hello, Doc. Can you hear me? Good morning.
Good morning.
I hope you're well.
Well, I'm surviving.
Great. So yesterday, or many people, either yesterday or this morning, so some people are waking up to the news, some people saw the news yesterday, the PRC writing to the presidency and saying that ECG is not in a good state, that it is bankrupt. How did we get to this point?
Well, a number of reasons. First and foremost, it's also the bad management of the macroeconomy, especially monetary policy, leading to a deteriorating exchange rate. Remember, ECG, like the most other assets in the sector, their payables are dollar denominated and their receivables are cedi denominated. They pay IPP, they pay for fuel, they pay for spares, all in USD, in dollars. But they receive cedi for their services. And so when there's such a deterioration in the exchange rate regime, it impacts very negatively on the utilities. And ECG is the lowest hanging fruit in terms of customer interaction. And so ECG suffers more than any other utility. ECG and Netco, they suffer most because they are the distribution end. That is one. Secondly, ECG, the over-politicization of issues with the ECG has also not helped. ECG is registered as a limited liability company, but corporate governance, financial management has been more of political gearing than pure business. Issues of ECG have been too politicized, even by the management of ECG itself. So that is another angle. Then, of course, there's a structural problem of ECG. Underfunding, inadequate investment, inadequate inflows. And it was precisely for this reason that former President Mahama, in his time, engaged the Millennium Challenge Corporation to pump some liquidity into ECG, particularly into retooling. Unfortunately, the Ghanaian state messed that up with the PDS debacle. And so the situation just moved from bad to worse.
Now, at this point in time, the PRC is recommending private participation. Are we not back to that same initiative you just referenced, for instance, the Millennium Challenge Development Program?
Well, we are back 8 years late. And so the situation has deteriorated. However, my issue today has to do with the timing. Yes, PURC as one of the two regulators and as the economic regulator, it is right for them to draw attention of government and of stakeholders to the pending insolvency of ECG if things continue on this trajectory. However, there is also the issue of timing. ECG needs major structural reform. That cannot be done in the transition period as we are in. So yes, it is important they've drawn attention of government, drawn attention of stakeholders to the potential insolvency of ECG. However, we can't do much until after January.
Much can't be done about it until January. Oh, unfortunately, we just lost Dr. Kwabena Donkor. That we'll try and re-establish contact with Dr. Kwabena Donkor on the energy-related issues. As you do know, the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission has sounded the alarm on the potential bankruptcy of ECG. They are struggling with their cash waterfall mechanism at the moment, and one of the recommendations being made, for instance, is private involvement, private sector involvement in ensuring that ECG performs to the maximum capacity. So, for instance, the financial crisis PRC speaks to in relation to ECG is that ECG declared revenues of $884.2 million and $857 million respectively, when which were insufficient to cover the monthly $47 million Tier A plus WAPCO bill under the cash waterfall mechanism. Those are some of the challenges confronting ECG at the moment. We are reworking the telephone lines. Hopefully we'll be able to connect to Dr. Kwabena Donkor, and then we can continue our conversation. But one of the key things he mentions as a challenge for ECG is that the over politicization is a major concern for with regard to ECG's performance, and he's also questioning the timing of PURC's alarm and the recommendation for private sector involvement. It says if any major decision at all can be taken, it will have to be in January. This is still the morning star here on Star 103.5 FM. We've been able to raise Dr. Kwabena Donkor once again over the telephone line. Let's go back and engage him. Doc, great to have you back. So you were saying that the timing of this recommendation, for instance, by the PURC, is kind of in quote suspect, and if any action can be taken at all, it probably would have to be in January.
Yes, the timing. This has always been known. The ECG has been in. For example, if only 42% of what they were expected to collect to meet their obligations was collected in the month of August, no business can survive that. No business can survive that. And it is in that PURC letter to government. And this challenge is not certain. If we check the year 2022, that is when the last audited accounts are available, ECG made a loss of over 10 billion cedis. So the signs have been on the wall. And therefore, we just have to find a way of managing the situation until 2025, when a new government will have the opportunity of looking at all the options, get all the various stakeholder consultations out of the way. Because ECG needs a fundamental restructuring. At least the distribution, the last mile end, the collection end, billing and collection, fall to reporting and repairs. We need a fundamental rethinking. And you cannot do that in October, November, December of an election year. It will take political colors and political connotation.
Now, some of the figures mentioned by the PRC, for instance, in July, PRC says that ECG declared revenues of 884.2 million Ghana cedis and 857 million Ghana cedis respectively. That is in June and July. So June was 884, July it was 857. And it goes on to say that these were insufficient to cover the monthly $47 million Tier A plus WAPCO's bill under the cash waterfall mechanism. Now, this cash waterfall mechanism itself, there are concerns that, well, it is not even concerns, that is having direct impact on the VRA and its operations. Why are we having challenges?
Well, when you don't populate, the cash waterfall is just a mechanism, it's just a framework. It's the money that goes into it that ensures its success. And therefore, if you don't populate the cash waterfall with mechanism with adequate funding, a minimum of 1.2 billion cedis, a minimum, should go into that cash waterfall mechanism to keep the status quo. That will not cover all payments, but at least that will keep the status quo, a minimum. And that 1.2 billion cedis today should even increase, because at the time the 1.2 billion cedis minimum was established, the exchange rate had not deteriorated to 16 cedis to the dollar. And therefore, today we are going to need even more than the 1.2 billion. And if we are receiving 800 million at 1.2, the shortfall is huge. And with that shortfall, you can only probably take care of the category A payments, which are to IPPs and to fuel. And so all other players downstream of category A, which will involve VRA, GridCo, which will involve the regulatory bodies, both PUIC and ECG, the ministry, all of them suffer. And so the cash waterfall mechanism on its own is just a mechanism. It is what you put into it. The funds you populate the mechanism with, it is that which is important. And if the funds are adequate, as they obviously are, then you run into the challenge of GridCo, VRA, the regulatory bodies, everybody suffering.
Now, one of the major issues that has been raised is that government is more focused on keeping the lights on. So they are pumping money into the payment of fuel, and then paying some selected IPPs. What is the long-term implication of this?
Well, the long-term implication is that the indebtedness, the energy power sector indebtedness of more than 2 billion US dollars increases by the month. And Ghana must find a solution to this. We will have to restructure the power sector. But the restructuring can only be done after adequate stakeholder consultations. It cannot be a knee-jerk reaction. We can only restructure when all stakeholders are on board, when all the variables are known. As we speak, we don't even know the total indebtedness of the power sector. The $2 billion to IPPs is just the minimum as at today, and it's increasing by the month. And remember, if we are unable to populate the cash waterfall mechanism with adequate CD funding, and with the deterioration of the CD against the dollar, the $43 million ECG has contracted to pay the IPPs on a monthly basis cannot even be paid. And the $43 million is not the invoice price. The invoice is higher than 43. The rest already is being rolled over. And therefore, the future is bleak. We are laying a foundation of disruption for the power sector going forward if we don't take the necessary steps that we have to take.
So you said we are laying the foundation for a major issue in the energy sector. Should these players, for instance, that are hugely affected, like the VRA, for example, should they be speaking? We've heard their senior staff association, protesting the proposed merger among others with BUI and the likes. But then again, these germane issues of the cash waterfall mechanism, they not being able to get the monies due them, and so it's affecting, the running of the place and payments of salaries and all that. Should they be speaking up?
You see, yes. You see, the energy sector needs a major restructuring. I mean, we cannot run away from that. Indeed, if you look at the 2020 manifesto of the NDC, there was a commitment to reform. The 2024 manifesto also has a commitment to reform. It is the process of reforming, is the implementation, is the consultation. There has to be adequate consultation with stakeholders. Stakeholders include consumers, they include the IPPs, they include the parastatals, VRA, etc. They include labor, organized labor, etc. We must have adequate consultation. Let's lay the facts bare. Must we walk and hit our heads against the wall, knowing that there is this huge hole, this huge abyss in front of us? Must we go into it? But the timing is the issue. If 3 months to an election, you now come out with proposals, of course, there will be political reading. Why now? You've had 8 years. Why now? So those are the real issues. But there's no doubt that there is a need to restructure and reform the energy sector with a view of enhancing efficiency, with a view of closing sealing the leaks, and with a view of positioning the sector for the future. The future has to be an industrial future. The future has to be a manufacturing future. And for the NDC, that is proposing the 24-hour economy, it is totally dependent on power, availability of and sustainability of power.
All right, Doc. Thank you so much for your time. We're grateful that you were able to speak to us.
Thank you so much.
You had us speak to former Power Minister Dr. Kwabena Donkor. This is the Morning Star here on Star 103.5 FM. In a bit, I'll open the telephone lines to hear your thoughts on all the issues we have touched on today on the Morning Star.